Hey now everybody, this is Professor Island, and today we're going to talk about works cited formatting. When you go to the website and you choose your class, whether you're on campus or off campus, you can click on there and you will find a paper format and test instruction link. And when you click on that and you scroll down, there will be a discussion not only of the various aspects of primary and secondary source, finding them and citing them in text, but also the formatting itself. Basically, MLA has updated now to MLA 8, and what they want essentially is the following information if you can find it. Basically, we want to know an author if you have one, and when you do find that author, you will cite that author by last name first. If there's more than one author, you'll cite the first one by last name first, and then the others will be listed in their normal way. So, for example, on this one here, you have King Stephen, that's Stephen King, his last name first. But with these two, you have two authors here, and so first is Thomas Arp, and the other one was Lawrence Perrine, and so this is Arp Thomas and Lawrence Perrine. In-text citation, by the way, would be King for this one, and then Arp and Perrine for this one. When you have more than three authors, such as my old chemistry book, you only list the first one and then you use the phrase et al. To indicate, and that's Latin, it means and others, and then you give me the rest of the information. The next thing we need is the thing itself, and that means it's an article from a journal, it is a story from an anthology, it is a newspaper article, or it is even a web page off of a website. It also includes things like the chapter of a book, if the chapters are named, the title of an episode of a series, and what you're doing is you're giving us the actual thing you're quoting. Do not ever give me a citation that says New York Times or Rolling Stone, because those are large entities and they have many articles. New York Times has been in existence for over 100 years, and essentially telling me you found something in the New York Times is like saying that you found it out in the world. It doesn't really give us enough information to find it. So what we're looking for is the actual article. The next thing we want is going to be the container, which they now call the container, which essentially is where you found the article or the episode or the story or whatever. Obviously, that would be a book title, or it would be a journal title, or a magazine title, or the title of a series. So, for example, if you were going to cite a particular Simpsons episode, you would give me, because there's no real author there, you would list it by the episode title. Bart gets a new skateboard, and then the container is The Simpsons, and then what follows then that container, whatever it happens to be, whether it's Rolling Stone magazine or PBS.org or short stories for students. The next thing you need is the publisher, and the publisher is the people who paid for the thing. Sometimes it's, for example, if you found something on A&E, it's at the A&E Networks. If you found something on the History Channel, it is also A&E Networks. If you found something on ESPN, it's owned by Cap Cities Disney. The deal is that this publishing company for a regular book is usually indicated with something like Doubleday or Harcourt Brace Yovanovitch, etc. On the internet, it is the group that basically owns the website, and sometimes it's the same name as the website, and sometimes it is different. PBS.org is both the publication, the website, but it's also the publisher. It's PBS. So you'll look for that, and then the last thing we need is the date that you accessed, or excuse me, the date that it was updated. And we'll talk about the access date shortly, but it's the date that it was updated, or the date that you're making reference to. For books and things like that, they get updated, for given years, and then what happens is they'll give us an edition. So the 8th edition, 5th edition, 7th edition, and the idea is that if you have the 5th edition and I have the 8th edition, we understand why my version of the resource might have different or updated material. For websites, the way that this works is that when the website gets updated, if you look down at the bottom, usually they indicate with a last modified or last updated date. You need to include that, so that way if you have a date that was last updated and then I go to look at it and the material is different, if it turns out that the website has been updated since you've seen it, then we understand why there is a distinction or a discrepancy between the two. Generally what you're looking for is to give us this information in this particular order, because in your reference page you're going to list these things in alphabetical order, not in the order that you use them. And essentially the first thing that we see, whether it's a name or if you have no name, the title of an article, such as this right here, which is the title of a television show, or this is the title of an article from a newspaper. That's what your citation is in text. So if you have an author, that citation would be Hilburn, 8, which is Hilburn on page 8. But if you were citing this here, it'd be Adolf Hitler in quotation marks in your parenthetical. In this one, it would be this long thing, MTA's got the message, now let's see follow through, as your citation, which would also include the page number. Essentially, what we're looking for is a code, as a way for us to find what you are claiming that you found. MLA formatting is different from APA formatting fundamentally in that APA formatting just requires general paraphrase. And that means there's a lot of leeway in terms of interpretation as to what something means. MLA is different because MLA often works with art and works with written works. We want to know exactly what words you are quoting from in order to gather the translation that you're applying, and therefore we need actual quotation. We need quotation from the primary source, and we need quotations from your secondary source, not paraphrase. And so we want you to cite actual quotation, and the only time you would cite paraphrase is if the paraphrase is clearly indicated as an opinion of the author. So if you were to tell me that Stephen King was born in 1952, which would be wrong, I'm just using it as an example. If you were to tell me he was born in 1952, that's not citable because that's easily found and easily identified as statistic. APA would cite that, MLA would not. If you were to say that Stephen King was the greatest writer ever, that's debatable. It depends on opinion, and you would have to have a resource in which a critic says that Stephen King is the greatest writer ever, and conversely you could find another author or another critic who might say that Stephen King is the worst writer ever. And the reason you're citing that is because that's an opinion. That's something that belongs to that author, in the same way that their actual words are going to be quoted. So if you're citing, you're either citing somebody's clear opinion or you are citing direct quotation, and we really need you to use that direct quotation. The way this all shakes out is that when you get to an example, a works cited page, you'll notice that it says works cited up at the top. You'll notice that these are listed in alphabetical order. You'll notice that it doesn't matter whether something is a television show or if it's an instructor's manual or if it's some awesome thing that somebody did in college. Essentially what you have is this list listed simply in alphabetical order, so that way we know what the first word is there. We know that's going to be the citation in text. You'll also notice a couple of these have this 3 lines here. What that means is that the work here, for example, we have Page, Jimmy, and Robert Plant, and this is Achilles' Last Stand, which is a song off the album Presence. The city was Munich. We don't have to add the city anymore. But the publisher was Atlantic Records, also Flames of Albion, which is a Led Zeppelin publishing house through Atlantic, and it was done in 1976. The deal is that this line means it's the same authors. And this is Nobody's Fault But Mine off the same album, Royal Orleans off the same album, T for One. And you'll notice that this information, although it's exactly the same, is all going to be repeated for every single one of them. What these lines tell us is that in text, we can't simply cite something by Page and Plant because we have 4 items that make reference to those authors. So it wouldn't make any sense. So instead, you're going to cite these items, all of them, including Achilles' Last Stand, Nobody's Fault But Mine, Royal Orleans, and T for One, all by title. And of course, if it's poetry, you'd also cite by line number. But more importantly, you can see that these elements tell us that these things, all of these, will be cited in text by title. The same way with these 2 Stephen King things, and these 2 things by me. Essentially, this formatting helps us to understand what you have, where you got it, where we can find it, so we can validate what you're saying, or we can translate what you found differently, but certainly it shows that you've done some actual research. Okay, the stuff that is on Gale Literature Resource Center and EBSCOhost is going to give you the citation, and you may decide to include the URL because that's what they're offering now. The URL is still optional, but since they usually give that to you automatically in the citation, you can include that if you like. When it comes to things that are outside of EBSCO and Gale, you're going to have to gather this information together. Keep in mind that EasyBib does not find stuff for you. It simply organizes the information that you give it in the correct order, which means if you have no publisher, if you have no publication, if you have no year, all of these are going to be blank, and that means you do not have enough information. You must find that material. When you're citing something from a record album or something along those lines, I need the original publication information, not something from Sing 365 or Easy Lyrics. I want the actual original publication information because I want to know what the original source is of the material you're working with. Okay? Do your research, find your resources, document them thoroughly on your works cited page. If you're in English 101, you are required to have a works cited page for your final paper, and if you're on any other class of mine, for 103 and up, you are required to have a works cited page for everything you submit. You're showing that you understand how to do research and that you know how to document it correctly. Okay? Keep in mind that MLA is for English classes and APA is something different. There's a discussion of that elsewhere on my website, but for the English classes, use MLA. That's pretty much the standard. All right? Stay in touch.